Welcome to the Actionable Futurist podcast, a show all about the near-term future with practical and actionable advice from a range of global experts to help you stay ahead of the curve. Every episode answers the question, what's the future of? With voices and opinions that need to be heard. Your host is international keynote speaker and actionable futurist Andrew Grill.
My guest today is Helena Nimmo, Chief Information Officer for Endava, a public technology company that are reimagining the relationship between people and technology. Helena joined Endava in 2019 and has been in the technology industry for over 20 years. A native of Finland, she started her career at Finnish technology giant Nokia in the logistics division before joining Symbian software and moving to London in 1999. She also worked in senior roles in publishing with Euromonitor and Thomson Reuters. Welcome, Helena.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's great to talk to you. And as this is a podcast, what I'm about to say breaks all the rules. We're recording this on video as well, and I see behind you a bunch of Encyclopedia Britannicas. And it brought me back to my childhood. My father, Ron, bought them all. And you were telling me a story off air about why you've kept these journals for so long.
These were books bought by my father nearly 50 years ago, and he's probably the only person I know who's read them cover to cover. I certainly haven't, but I keep them as a good reminder. This is how we used to view the world. This was the data source that we had, and how the world has changed since then. It's just an incredible journey.
That's a beautiful segue. I want to talk a lot about data today, and I read in a recent interview where you said that data is what makes technology relevant. So what do you mean by that?
We do not access systems for the sake of the systems. We access the systems to either consume content. If you take Facebook, that's what the technology enables us to consume content. Similarly, in the work context, we access systems to be able to complete our daily tasks. Well, that's what I mean when I say that data is the key part of the systems. If you put rubbish into the system, you're not going to get anything out of it, be it content or be it work-related. So there is a huge responsibility for all of us as custodians of that data to make sure it's relevant and it's pertinent to what the purpose of the system is.
Now, for those of you who haven't heard of Endava, where do you actually play in the IT ecosystem?
If we place Endava in the IT ecosystem, we have some very, very talented people sitting in a sweet spot across three offerings. You've got the business and the technology consultancy piece, you've got the digital agencies, and then you've got the traditional IT services. So we focus on creating multidisciplinary teams across these capabilities to create the most engaging and efficient solutions for our customers.
You started your career at Nokia well over 20 years ago. And I actually remember standing on stage probably 15 years ago, maybe longer, and I would ask a question of the audience, who has a Nokia? And everyone's hand went up. Over the years, there have been fewer and fewer hands, but there's been lots of changes since you're at Nokia. What changes have you seen over the last 20 years or so in the mobile space?
I think the mobile sector, mobile industry in particular, has been a huge engine for the transformation that we've seen in our working lives and as consumers as well. So in the 90s, I remember the most ambitious estimates were that about 50 or 60% of the developed world's population would have a mobile device. And look at it now, it's 100+%. People are bothering less and less with landlines. The developing world, in many cases, has completely jumped the landline phase, moving straight into mobile data. You know, the shift from hardware, you know, the pride of owning that Nokia phone that never ever broke, ever, even if you dropped it off a third floor balcony, the focus has now shifted into software. The mobile being your absolutely everything device, not just a phone, and the ecosystems of the applications, wearables that we have. I don't think anyone could have predicted all the changes that have taken place just by those mobile devices becoming so popular.
I was a Nokia person for many years. I think my last Nokia phone was the E72, the one with the keyboard. But one thing I do remember, and I remarked on this the other day, is that you used to get a really thick instruction manual. It walked you through what all the screens did and how to access various functions. I think most phones we buy these days, you're lucky even to get a charger in the box. We really have seen the change to putting all the emphasis back on the user to learn how to use it rather than being instructive from the person who sold it to you.
You're absolutely correct. It nearly feels like there is this expected level of knowledge on how to operate these pieces of technology. And I think this is one of the key bits that we should actually reflect on and maybe take a step back, because it does make an assumption that everybody has got that same level of base understanding. And I think that is a really, really dangerous place to go into, because that is clearly not the case. Not everybody understands technology the same way as somebody who has been using a mobile phone for the past 20 years.
I have an engineering degree, I'm a geek, I'm a futurist. You're a CIO, so we probably assume that setting up a Wi-Fi access point at home for us is straightforward. I know most of my friends just get frustrated because there are so many options and why doesn't it work out of the box. So I think that's becoming more and more of an issue. We're going to talk a bit about digital transformation. I know that you have a problem with that word, and I probably do as well. I hear you prefer digital acceleration. So what's the difference between digital transformation and digital acceleration, and why do you prefer the latter term?
I think digital transformation suggests that you have a blank canvas, and that is rarely true anymore in any organization, in any sector. So hence why I've got a preference to talk about digital acceleration, because you already have some digital solutions in place. So it's important to build upon those, because the users are usually the ones who have chosen to put them in there. For many technology leaders, this does mean that we have to acknowledge shadow IT. Again, these are predominantly software as a service solutions, and they're there for a reason, because the users have found something frustrating about your IT estate. So acknowledging them and just building them into the overall technology estate. So hence why I talk about digital acceleration, building on what you currently have rather than going into this grand plan of complete changing everything.
Let's just expand on this term shadow IT, because I know what it means, but some of my listeners may not have heard it before. They may have heard of the terminology bring your own device, or BYOD. It means you have an iPhone or a Samsung or an Android phone and you'd like to keep using it. When I was at IBM, we were allowed to bring our own devices, but they were locked down. And we had to sign a piece of paper saying if we lost it, the IBM technical people had the right to wipe it, which was fair enough. But are we going to see more and more of BYO and now so many internet connection points that you have no control over?
It's a very evolving space right now. So I think there's the definition between bring your own device and shadow IT. And shadow IT, a lot of people think of it as I'm buying a subscription from somebody to use their system. And I think Zoom is a really good example of that, on how it really, really took off. It was a subscription service. Actually, it was even a free service. But people then subscribed in a company in it using maybe their corporate credit cards or just expensing it back. And they used it because they find it a really good collaboration space. Now, that is all right if it's just used in that kind of subscription service. But often what happens is that these popular platforms or popular tools, they started to get added into, and suddenly you realize that something that is not truly in the IT estate, or the IT department hasn't looked at it, has become a really key critical piece of your business. So that's what I mean with shadow IT. Bring your own devices. You're right. I've got my own mobile phone. I access work email on it. And yes, I have signed a piece of paper where the teams can go and wipe it if I do lose it. But with more and more web applications, clearly you can access them from any device. There is the downside to all of this, which is unfortunately we also have to control the security piece, especially with the explosion of ransomware and cyber threats that we've seen over the past 18 months. But there's ways and means of doing that as a CIO. So you can still allow people to use different devices to access data. The main thing is that you are keeping them and the company safe by putting in certain safeguards around security that will enable them to work safely anywhere in the world.
And that becomes more and more important now that we're going to move to a hybrid and distributed workforce. We'll talk more about that in a minute, but what extra tools does a CIO need in the toolkit to manage these remote installations when it can be in someone's home, can be coffee shop, what I call a third place? And how much harder has it become over the last 18 or 24 months for you to keep those bad actors out?
The pre-pandemic security setup was very office focused, very location focused. You came into the office and we will shut the doors and we will keep you all safe in that office, both from a physical and from a cyber perspective. Clearly, when we all started working from home, that started to introduce a number of challenges into it. I'm pleased to say we're seeing quite a lot of advances in the technology in this space to be able to keep people working safely anywhere in the world. Multi-factor authentication is a piece that's definitely coming into play more. Data loss preventions, the zero trust approach to any device connecting into your network. So having a quick check and a handshake, is it really truly you and your device coming in? So all of these are becoming really, really valuable. I think there's also another piece around that, which is when we moved into home working, the change in routine also made people more tired. And when you're tired, you make mistakes. So we've seen a huge increase in phishing attempts and fraud attempts, where there's definitely a capitalization on people being less vigilant because they might be more tired sitting at home and working longer hours. So the education of not just the corporate security, but individual security, I think is really important.
Now you work across multiple industries. Are you seeing boards and senior executives really taking cybersecurity seriously?
Oh, absolutely. I think there's obviously all the reports that we're seeing. There has been some significant attacks being played out recently. We've obviously had some significant outages also as well. But I think there's a bit more of a hidden strand that is also definitely taking the board's attention, which is with all these increased attacks and with the hybrid working, insurance, cyber insurance in particularly is increasing significantly. So when we're starting to talk about 20, 30, 40% increases in cybersecurity cost, that does usually catch your attention.
And especially the threat of being sued or being fined due to GDPR laws. The fine is 4% of global revenues if you let data go out and it's your fault. Back to what you're doing. I'd like to know what sort of projects Endava has been taking on over the last 18 months. What sectors have you seen grown faster or slower? And which ones have adopted digital projects or transformation or acceleration?
I think that's a really good question. In each of the sectors, you have companies that are more proactive, more focused on the future, and then there's companies who are much more reactive, looking at how business has been done in the past. So I don't think there's huge variations between the different sectors. What we have seen is that many organizations have been addressing the digital breakages that the move away from the offices kind of exposed. So they've realized that it's really important to digitize the key processes across all of the systems involved, not just one system, but actually taking it all the way from the start of the process to the end of the process. Others have been about creating more transparency across the demand and supply ecosystems in both consumers and companies. I think open banking is a fantastic example of this. That is a concept where you as a consumer or as a business, you can see all of your bank accounts across all of your various different banks that you might be conducting business with. You will be able to see them all in one place. So obviously that creates kind of a significant transparency. Another one which is quite interesting and pertinent to the current supply chain challenges that we're seeing is the inventory level management, combining that with the import-export documentation, automating that to put them more in hand. Increases in platform business models. So we've been working with initiatives across e-bike platform for Europe or another exciting one, which is Ox. It's a sharing platform with Ox vehicles connecting rural African producers with transport so that they can get their products to market. So the kind of platform concept. And finally, the thing I think we're all seeing is the focus on the end user experience. Really important on making the engagement with technology more intuitive and engaging, because suddenly you don't have somebody there right next to you to support you through some of the questions that you might have. The technology needs to be more intuitive and more responsive to what your needs are.
I want to pick up on something you just said. You mentioned the term digital breakage. I haven't heard that before. I think I know what it is. But where is this happening and what is breaking?
I had a personal experience right at the beginning of the pandemic. In the throes of everything, I forgot to renew my insurance. I just missed my insurance by one day, but by missing that insurance renewal by one day, I wasn't able to click on the link as in renew your insurance, because the rule that was written in was that you have to click it before your insurance runs out. Anyway, as a result, I tried to call them, but they had no people to speak to me. So I ended up completely changing my insurer, going with somebody who had a fully online experience, and I could just, not renew, basically subscribe to a new insurance there and then. And I think that's a really good example of the digital breakage. The first bits that you interact with as a consumer or as a user, they work to a certain extent. And then immediately, if you go slightly outside of the norm, you couldn't complete the process as expected. And as a result of that, the business effectively lost my money because I chose to go with somebody else.
So one of the byproducts of the pandemic, and it's been a horrible experience for everyone, but I think it's actually stress tested a lot of companies. And the example you gave was they didn't know that there was an issue. So has the pandemic over the last 2 years or so taught us anything about the need to accelerate every interaction, every project that was in pilot or on hold? What board wouldn't say we need to fast track what we're doing with digital?
It's very clear that technologists and technology initiatives are in high demand at the moment. So we're definitely seeing that acceleration of digital initiatives. I always guide with some caution here, which is, can you eat the elephant in one sitting? So there is the challenge there that you try and take on too much, and neither the IT team can effectively deliver it, or the organization and the teams that you're looking to deliver to can actually take the change on board. I think those are some of the challenges that people need to look at when they're looking at accelerating or loading up their technology development plans. Is your appetite as big as your stomach effectively is? Can you truly take on board as an organization everything you're trying to do?
If the organization is broken anyway, because there's no amount of technology to fix, that becomes a real problem, which leads me to when we talk about transformation or acceleration, part of it is technology, but I would argue that a lot of it is about culture change. So how important is explaining the need for transformation and getting the right buy-in from employees early on in the process? And what do you teach clients to do?
So that is a really, really good point. There is the famous saying, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I think that is very, very true in any of the big program or project initiatives that organizations are putting in place. I think there is also, beyond the culture piece, there is also the process piece. And technology is there to support processes. It is not there to circumvent them. Individuals are those who create and maintain those processes. So I think the user engagement is really, really important. Even before you start any initiative, it doesn't come out of the blue. There is always a bit of a trickle of information, or the hints are there that something isn't quite right. If you have your ear to the ground and you have the right conversations with the end users, you will get foresight into it. And that is really, really helpful when you start gaining and having the conversations about what is it we're truly trying to do. And I think that is really important in the user community as well as the senior level sponsorship. It is truly explaining not just from a single user group's angle on what is the problem they're trying to solve, but making sure that each of the teams involved in the overall process are aware of each other's challenges on what is it they're trying to fix as they're moving through the process. And I think that transparency and that collaboration piece, I think that is the bit that is key for making any project, IT or process successful and making it stick within the culture of the organization.
So a related topic around culture is diversity and the diversity of all types. I want to talk about a different type of diversity. That's digital diversity. Having someone on every team, every board, every management team who understands technology, who understands what it means for the business. Are you seeing enough digital diversity in the industries that you're operating in?
Probably not. And I say that with a little bit of hesitation because there is a point there where the IT teams, the technologists are the experts in this space. And I do believe that actually as technologists, we have a responsibility for educating all of our colleagues around technology, the trends that are happening. What do these technologies maybe mean for the organization, and not keeping it to ourselves. In technology projects and all of the methodologies that we've had, we've got a really robust framework about understanding the user's requirements, understanding the business challenges that you're looking to address. What we do not have, and I think we should counter and put in place, we have got a responsibility for educating and sharing our knowledge as well, not just be seen as that black box. I think there's also the digital diversity, which is not just about understanding technology and the engineering piece of it. That's a very STEM-focused issue. I think we've got extra challenges with now having 4 different generations at work together. There's different expectations on how we use systems, how we access data. Anybody with a disability, similarly, what does that interface and access look like for you? So not just looking at it from a technology perspective, but looking at digital diversity also from the perspective on how you use and access data through the systems. I think that's going to be something we should be raising up in the agenda.
You talk about the need for digital literacy, and I think it's right that the technologists reach out because you're the expert. I've spent my career educating senior executives on what these technologies mean in a really accessible way. I had a recent guest on my podcast who argued that we need better AI literacy. He thought that AI literacy was as important a skill to young students as understanding how money works. Do you agree?
I agree to an extent, in the sense that yes, people need to understand what AI is, especially in the context of cultural awareness and some of the scary messages that are going out there that machines are going to rule the world. I think we need to truly understand and educate people on the basics that it's people who generate these algorithms that are called AI. It's not something that is born and can maintain itself on its own. So I think that there's a level of understanding, that basic understanding that needs to be there. But just like it's important to understand how money operates and how money works, it doesn't mean that everybody needs to be an economist. So I think we need to just get that balance right. But people do need to understand, and we do need to build this into all our training initiatives and better into children's education as well, and some of what are these concepts and what do they mean for us.
I think the other thing that's going to come out is ethics in AI. Everything that we teach. AI systems have to be taught by humans, and that means they are introducing conscious bias. If I look back here in the UK a while ago at Christmas, they have a program on the commercial Channel 4 network called The Alternative Queen's Message. The Queen does her message at 3 o'clock on Christmas Day to the BBC audience, and then Channel 4 try and do something funny. But recently, they actually had a deep fake. And I've been talking a lot about deep fakes on other podcasts where they basically had an actress who was made to look like the Queen and sounded like the Queen. I think that was very smart of Channel 4 because it raised to the general public that not everything you see online is real, and you need to be aware of that. So I think you're right to say you don't have to be an AI expert, but you need to question who's trained that system. So how important do you see ethics and AI?
I think ethics in AI is an absolutely fascinating topic, because you're right, there is the bias education that is taking place. So it is understanding the root on how that information is collected, how the algorithm has been created, and what is the purpose of it. And I think ethics is going to be something that maybe needs to be debated more than it has been. And that then comes back into the data question. What data can you truly add into it? What data can you use? What assumptions are being made? And I think that's the important bit about AI and the ethics piece, is the making sure the pathways of the algorithms are transparent enough that you always understand how the information or how the analysis was derived from and what is driving it. And I think that is going to be something that we do have to debate a little bit more.
I want to talk about managing remote and distributed teams. We've been forced to have an experiment for a couple of years about working away from the normal environment. I'm sure many of your new hires probably onboarded virtually over the last couple of years. How does this change the effectiveness of employees? And can technology help rather than hinder here?
I think there's a generational piece there that comes into play. So, for example, out of my own team, I hired 3 of my direct reports during the pandemic, and it took me over 12 months to actually meet them face to face, which meant that we built an entire leadership team without having the opportunity to physically sit in a room and have the conversations. Given that we were all senior and people who'd been around the industry for a while, it worked okay for us. The meeting democracy that has come into play with everybody being online rather than 2 people being in the office. If you are somebody who's just starting in your career, actually being able to take on the physical cues and being able to do the social interaction within and outside of work, I think that is a tougher piece to crack. And I think in there, those who are just starting out in their career, I would say that they had a disadvantage by missing out on the social side of things. And then how can technology help? Well, obviously, we've had great progress and great cases with all of the online technology that has come into play, the collaboration spaces, Microsoft evolving Teams to respond to what Zoom was doing, and being able to kind of maintain that. So I think that has been fantastic, and it will definitely support us going forward. Then you've got the more social side of things, which is the online quiz events and being able to interact with some of those. You can gain some of it from being on screen, but you cannot gain the full experience of being physically in the same room. And then when you do get together physically in the same room, I think the conversation and the rapport checking and building that relationship becomes much, much more important.
So as more teams return to the office in a hybrid configuration, what does this mean for the CIO in terms of office technology to cope with multiple remote joiners rather than in the past, you've got the few of them dialing in?
Goes back to the point what I said about kind of online meeting democracy. I think that was a huge leveler for a lot of people. Previously, when you had a management meeting around the table and 2-3 people dialing in, those 2-3 people never got the same voice as those around the table. So I think one of the biggest challenges for a CIO is to be able to maintain that, put that technology together to be able to maintain that truly kind of global meeting democracy. That's not going to be easy because as human beings, we will revert quite quickly to you have got people in the room and you engage and interact with them differently and have the little side conversations than with those who happen to be online. So that is definitely going to be a big challenge on how we address that and how we do not end up in a situation that if you want to be part of the party, or in some organizations their suggestion even part of the promotion paths, that you don't have to travel. Because my assumption is that based now on what we have done with home working is that not everybody will want to travel either because of environmental reasons or because they do not feel safe traveling. And the idea that we would lose the talent and the individuals out of the organizations because we haven't managed to crack that meeting etiquette piece with our technology, I think that would be a real shame.
I would argue that with people that don't want to come in and they want to work from home, you actually get access to people you wouldn't normally be able to recruit because they could be in different countries or different time zones. In fact, another anecdotal experience I've had from a number of friends actually working in consulting companies and in the city, they said that those that have come back a few days a week into the office have found they've actually had to go into separate meeting rooms because they all go on Zoom and everyone's on a Zoom call. They can't hear each other, there's feedback, so they actually end up being in separate rooms in the same building to cater for everyone that's online and not in the building. Years ago, you'd remember Cisco pioneered the telepresence concept with a huge curved screen and the camera would zoom in on you. Is it time to get a cost-effective version of that operating in every boardroom and in every meeting room?
I think we should be looking beyond telepresence, and I think we should be looking at VR as part of meeting concepts. And I know it is still very much in its infancy. VR can make people very nauseous. There's also the limitations of the size of the headset, so what that does to your physical well-being. And also, it's not recommended that you use it for hours on end every day. But I think that feels like the next telepresence a piece that we have. And maybe there's experimenting there to be done with taking a meeting room aside and turning it into that full VR capability green room effectively, and starting to look at the kind of global meetings from that perspective. But yeah, I know what you mean about the telepresence screens. They were brilliant at the time, weren't they?
Well, when they worked, because if I had a pound or a dollar or a euro for every time we had to wait 25 minutes for the other side to get their ISDN bridge up, when it worked perfectly. Just staying with what we've learned over the last couple of years, what was your biggest learning from the last few years?
Oh, there are so many. So I think one of the biggest learnings was that as a leader and as a people manager, there is definitely a flip that needs to happen. So it is the leaders and the managers' job to go to the people, not the other way round. Very much making sure that everybody is okay. I don't think in my career I have ever asked or been asked the question as I have as often as during the pandemic, which is everything okay? As in, is that leaving that open-ended question, is there anything you want to talk about which is making you uncomfortable? Are you getting the support you need? That's definitely something that I look upon a really big learning from the pandemic.
So what practices do you think you'll keep when this is all over? And how did you see yourself changing as a manager as a result of this experience?
Definitely us keeping and maintaining that question, that checking in, are you okay? I think there's another great thing that has come out of working on screens and having meetings on screens is checking and making sure that everybody gets a turn to speak and voice their opinion. So when you're on screen and you've got everybody there, actually it's quite easy to go, right, that person has been really vocal and I know that person has got a lot of opinions. We have got a couple of individuals who are not actually saying anything, making sure that you engage them in. So I think that is something that I'm definitely looking to keep going forward, making sure everybody has got equal voice and equal time to say it in.
Now, with my futurist hat on, looking at what's coming down the path, what's the most exciting piece of new technology or platform you've seen this year and why?
I think virtual reality in some of those kind of meeting rooms and training capabilities is going to be brilliant. I also think there's going to be a significant acceleration of AR. So being able to have that augmented reality, especially in jobs and roles where you need to have hands-on experience. I think that is going to be something that is going to become a really powerful online training tool. Because even once we start returning to work at the levels that we return to, or return into our educational institutions, I think there is going to be a mix of online training and in-person training that will stick, and be very, very excited to watch how that evolves.
So how do you stay up to date with all the new technology trends, and what advice would you have for other CIOs about staying relevant and digitally curious?
Well, there's so many trends nowadays. It is near impossible to be absolutely on top of everything. There is not enough hours in the day to be able to do your job as well as keep on absolutely on top of everything else. There are pieces that I read, and there are conversations and conferences that I tend to get certain understanding and get that picture about some of the macro trends that might be happening. And then there is always the need on certain initiatives to go down into a deeper level, just listening and learning and constantly just checking in, but also hiring some true experts. One of the most valuable things I have found is that always hiring people who are smarter than you, that are better than you in the areas that they specialize in, are hugely valuable team members, because they will raise comments or questions and challenge your thinking in a way that you might have not challenged yourself before. So I think that's going to be a really important thing. Remaining relevant. Make sure that you talk to all of the users in your organization. And here is not just to, the 80% of the interactions that you have with individuals at your peer level or just above or below. I think it is really important that CIOs really talk to all user groups across the organization, especially the younger ones, because they have a very different expectation on technology than we might have. The classic example is email versus Snapchat. What does that look like? What is the future of communications? And if we don't talk to these individuals, how do we truly know to set up an organization that will be fit for them and their future once we're gone?
We're almost out of time, so I want to run you through a quick fire round where we can learn a bit more about you. iPhone or Android?
Android.
PC or Mac?
PC.
Your biggest hope for 2022?
Everybody gets access to the vaccine.
What's the app you use most on your phone?
Everything from emails to calendars to WhatsApp to Signal to, I run all of my IoT on my mobile phone as well. So my Hoover runs from my mobile phone.
What's the one thing you won't be doing again post-pandemic?
Make an assumption that everybody wants to travel all of the time.
What are you reading at the moment?
I'm just about to go on holiday, so I am moving into the less serious, lighter touch reading. So I'm currently reading Angela Marsons, who is a crime writer.
How do you want to be remembered?
For somebody who enjoyed life and was fun to be around.
So as this is the Actionable Futurist podcast, what are 3 things your listeners can do today when it comes to configuring a digital acceleration project?
Take a look at what your plans currently are. Take a long, hard look. Are they just the initiatives that were there before the pandemic, or has something cropped in? If it has, great, but definitely look at the priorities from that perspective. Add training and education in as a really big theme in your roadmaps. And we're very good when we do investment initiatives and we put the change management piece in. But actually, I think the pandemic has shown us, back right to the beginning, we talked about it, it's really important to be able to not make assumptions about the level of understanding that people have. And finally, always check what is the appetite for the change in the organization. Are people able and willing to accept all of the changes that are being proposed as part of your roadmaps?
3 very actionable pieces of advice there. Helena, how can people find out more about you and your work?
I'm on LinkedIn, as in is Endava, and then obviously do visit endava.com website. There are a lot of white papers there and a lot of excellent client stories on projects that we've done.
Thank you so much for your time today. I really enjoyed our discussion. Stay safe and enjoy those encyclopedias behind you.
I will do. Thank you very much, Andrew.
Thank you for listening to the Actionable Futurist podcast. You can find all of our previous shows at actionablefuturist.com. And if you like what you've heard on the show, please consider subscribing via your favourite podcast app so you never miss an episode. You can find out more about Andrew and how he helps corporates navigate a disruptive digital world with keynote speeches and C-suite workshops delivered in person or virtually at actionablefuturist.com. Until next time, this has been the Actionable Futurist podcast.